Scattered notes, the last piano key Octavia Reynolds ever played in public, still haunted her dreams. That final lingering note cut short when she fled the stage. 3 years ago, seemed to echo in every quiet moment of her life. "You're embarrassing." "Yourself," Julian had whispered backstage before her recital at the Westbrook Music Hall. "Amateur hour is over, darling. You don't belong in this world." His words shouldn't have mattered. After all, he was just her boyfriend of 8 months, not her teacher, not a critic, not even particularly musical himself. But Julian Blackwood came from a family of renowned musicians and moved through Boston's cultural elite with the casual confidence of someone born into privilege. And Octavia, with her community college education and waitressing job, had been desperately trying to belong. That night, dressed in a second-hand gown she'd carefully altered, Octavia had walked onto the stage already defeated. When her fingers trembled over a particularly difficult passage in the Chopin piece, she heard a distinctive snicker from the third row. Julian's laugh. She'd stopped mid-performance, stood up shakily, and walked off stage to whispers and confused applause. By morning, Julian had collected his things from her apartment. "I can't be with someone who lacks the discipline this life requires," he'd said, not meeting her eyes. "Some people just aren't cut out for greatness." Now, at 28, Octavia's life had settled into a comfortable, if uninspired, routine. The grand piano that had once dominated her small apartment was gone, sold to pay for her course in event management. She worked at Harmony events, coordinating weddings and corporate functions with practiced efficiency. Her colleagues appreciated her attention to detail and calm demeanor. None of them knew about her past. "Octavia," Mr. Valenti's team called again about the benefit concert. Her assistant Penny said, poking her head into Octavia's office. "They want to finalize the layout today." Octavia nodded, trying to ignore the familiar twist in her stomach at the mention of a concert. "Tell them I'll send over the revised plans by 3. The Valenti Foundation's annual benefit for music education was Harmony Events' most prestigious client. The irony wasn't lost on Octavia organizing a celebration of musical achievement, while her own piano gathered dust in someone else's home. Later that afternoon, Octavia found herself at the Bayside Concert Hall, clipboard in hand as she directed the setup crew. The space was magnificent, soaring ceilings, perfect acoustics, a stage that had hosted some of the world's finest musicians. "Excuse me, but I believe that piano needs to be stage right." Octavia turned to find a tall man with thoughtful brown eyes, watching the crew maneuver the gleaming grand piano. He wore no tie with his expensive suit, and his dark hair had a slightly wind-blown look. "Mr. Valente," she said, recognizing him from the Foundation's website. "We've been corresponding by email. I'm Octavia Reynolds from Harmony Events. Dominic." Valenti's smile was warm as he shook her hand. "The woman who saved my benefit. My previous coordinator quit with 3 weeks' notice." "Happy to help," she replied professionally, though her eyes kept drifting to the piano. Its polished surface reflected the stage lights like a dark mirror. "Do you play?" he asked, following her gaze. "No," she said too quickly. "Not anymore." Something in her tone must have revealed more than she intended because his expression softened. "That's a shame. I always thought music was one of those things that, once it gets into your blood, never really leaves." Octavia changed the subject, directing him to the seating chart. But as they worked through the event details, she couldn't shake the feeling that Dominic Valenti saw something in her that she'd been hiding from everyone else, even herself. And when he casually mentioned that the benefit needed one more performer to complete the program, Octavia felt that final, unresolved note from 3 years ago suddenly hum to life again in her chest, waiting, perhaps for a chance to finally find its resolution. New composition, the Valente Foundation's benefit concert, was 2 weeks away, and Octavia had successfully buried herself in logistics, seating arrangements, catering details, lighting coups, anything to avoid thinking about the grand piano that dominated the stage during her daily visits to the venue. "These hydrangeas should be blue, not purple," she informed the florist firmly, making a note on her clipboard. Mr. Valente was specific about matching the Foundation's colors. "Speaking of the man himself," murmured Penny, nudging Octavia gently. "Dominic." Valenti was striding across the concert hall. Today in a charcoal sweater that somehow made him look both casual and distinguished. In the weeks since their first meeting, Octavia had found herself increasingly aware of his presence, how he greeted every staff member by name. The thoughtful questions he asked about the event planning, the way his eyes crinkled slightly at the corners when he smiled. "Ms. Reynolds," he called, "do you have a moment?" They walked together toward the stage, where the lighting technicians were adjusting the spotlights. "I've been meaning to ask you," Dominic said. "Why event planning? Seem to have a natural affinity for it, but I'm curious about what drew you to this career." Octavia gave her standard response. "I enjoy bringing order to chaos, creating experiences for people." "That's what your resume says," he replied with a knowing smile. "But there's something else, isn't there? The way you look at that piano when you think no one's watching." Heat rose to Octavia's cheeks. Was she so transparent? "I studied music once," she admitted. "It didn't work out." Dominic nodded, not pressing further. Instead, he gestured toward the piano. "Would you mind if I played for a moment? I need to check the acoustics from this angle." Without waiting for her response, he sat at the bench and lifted the fallboard. His fingers hovered over the keys for a moment before launching into a piece. Octavia recognized immediately Debussy's Clair de Lune. Rendered with surprising skill, Octavia found herself moving closer, drawn by the familiar melody. Dominic played with technical proficiency, but also with genuine feeling something Julian. For all his family's musical pedigree had always lacked. When the final notes faded, Dominic looked up at her. "Your turn. I told you I don't play anymore. I don't believe you." His voice was gentle but persistent. Musicians don't just stop being musicians. They might stop performing, but the music remains. Something in his quiet certainty made Octavia sit beside him on the bench before she could overthink it. Her fingers trembled slightly as they found their position on the keys, muscle memory taking over after 3 years of absence. She began with a simple batch prelude. The notes, tentative at first, then growing more confident. When she finished, the silence in the hall felt different, expectant, rather than empty. "Who told you to stop?" Dominic asked quietly. Octavia's hands jerked away from the keys. "I don't know what you mean. When convinced you that you weren't." "Good enough. I'd like to know who, so I can tell them they were wrong." His directness was disarming. Before she could formulate a deflection, the story of Julian and her disastrous final recital spilled out. "So you let one man's opinion silence." "Your music," Dominic said when she finished. "But that seems like giving him extraordinary power." "It wasn't just an opinion," Octavia replied, feeling the old defensiveness rise. He was right. "I wasn't prepared for that level of performance." "Perhaps. But that doesn't mean you should never play again." Dominic closed the piano gently. "Me for dinner tonight? Not as my event coordinator, just as yourself." "I don't think that's appropriate," she began. "Then consider it a business meeting." "I still need one more performer for the benefit." His eyes held a challenge. "We can discuss possibilities." That evening, at a small Italian restaurant tucked away from Boston's busy streets, Octavia found herself relaxing in Dominic's company. He spoke passionately about the Foundation's work, providing musical education to underprivileged children. "My father was a factory worker who saved 4 years to buy me a second-hand piano," he explained. "Music was my escape from our cramped apartment. My ticket to university." "Not everyone is so fortunate." "You don't come from money?" Octavia asked, surprised. Julian had always emphasized bloodlines and breeding as prerequisites for cultural appreciation. Dominic laughed. "The Valenti fortune is entirely self-made and relatively recent. I developed a music streaming algorithm in graduate school that was eventually acquired for an obscene amount of money, and you used it to start the Foundation." "Music gave me everything," he said simply. "I wanted to return the favor." As they shared tiramisu for dessert, Dominic finally circled back to his proposition. "Our closing performer for the benefit had to withdraw a family emergency. I need someone to play a 5-minute piece to end the evening." His eyes met hers. "It should be you, Octavia." She nearly choked on her espresso. "Absolutely not. I haven't performed in years. You played beautifully today." "That was different." There was no audience, just me, he finished. And I'm a far harsher critic than most. Octavia shook her head firmly. I appreciate the vote of confidence, but I can't. The memories of last time. They're too strong. And make new ones, Dominic said, reaching across the table to touch her hand briefly. One piece, 5 minutes. If nothing else, it will exorcise the ghost of that unfinished recital. His words followed Octavia home that night. In her apartment, she found herself searching online for piano rentals, her fingers itching to practice properly for the first time in years. When she finally fell asleep, she dreamed not of her humiliating exit from the stage, but of returning to it, this time with Dominic watching from the wings, his belief in her somehow stronger than her own doubt. Rising crescendo, the upright piano delivered to Octavia's apartment looked nothing like the gleaming grand she had once owned, but its worn keys felt like old friends beneath her fingers. For the past week, she had risen before dawn to practice the familiar exercises, slowly bringing dexterity back to hands that had forgotten their purpose. She had chosen Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, not the piece from her disastrous recital, but one that felt like coming home. Each morning, she played until her shoulders ached and her neighbors began to stir, then rushed to shower and transform back into the efficient event planner everyone knew. You seem different lately, Penny commented as they reviewed the seating chart for the benefit. More ... alive somehow. Octavia merely smiled, unwilling to share her secret. She hadn't formally agreed to Dominic's proposal to perform, but the piano in her living room suggested. Her subconscious had already made the decision. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dominic. Rehearsal running late. Dinner at 8 instead of 7. Their business dinner had somehow evolved into regular meetings, sometimes to discuss the benefit, but increasingly to explore the city together. Dominic had taken her to hidden jazz clubs, introduced her to his favorite bookstore owner, and once, in a downpour, pulled her into an impromptu dance on an empty street corner, both of them laughing as they were soaked to the skin. You're dating him, Penny said bluntly, reading the smile on Octavia's face as she texted back her reply. Professional, Octavia insisted, though the flutter in her stomach when she thought of Dominic suggested otherwise. That evening, they met at a small French bistro in Back Bay. Dominic looked tired, but brightened when he saw her. Sorry about the delay, he said. Our violinist is having trouble with the Paganini piece. The acoustic balance in that hall can be tricky, Octavia replied without thinking, then caught herself. These casual references to musical technicalities had begun slipping into her conversation more frequently, as if the practicing Octavia and the professional Octavia were slowly merging back into one person. Dominic smiled. Speaking of music, how's the Nocturne coming along? She raised an eyebrow. Who says I'm playing anything? The rental piano company sent the confirmation to the foundation by mistake. His eyes danced with amusement. I was going to mention it, but I was afraid you'd change your mind if I pushed. Octavia sighed. I haven't decided yet. Some days it feels possible, and others... double quotes. What happens on the others? She twisted her napkin. I hear Julian's laugh. I feel the shame all over again. Dominic reached across the table, his hand covering hers. Play for me, tomorrow at the hall, just us. The next day, after the workers had gone home, Octavia sat at the concert grand on the empty stage. Dominic stood nearby, his presence somehow both calming and exhilarating. Close your eyes, he instructed. Forget where you are. Forget what happened before. Just find the music. Octavia let her eyelids drop, took a deep breath, and began to play. The Nocturne flowed from her fingers, imperfect in places, but honest. When the final note faded, she opened her eyes to find Dominic, watching her with an expression that made her heart skip. That, he said quietly, is why you must perform. She began attending rehearsals for the benefit, officially as the coordinator, but increasingly as a participant. The other musicians professionals who had been performing for years welcomed her with unexpected warmth. We all have stage fright stories, confided Teresa, the lead violinist. Mine involved throwing up on a conductor's shoes at Carnegie Hall. As the benefit drew closer, Octavia found herself divided between her duties as coordinator and her commitment. As a performer, one evening, overwhelmed by details still needing attention, she sat at her rented piano feeling paralyzed by doubt. Her phone rang. Dominic. "Everything all right?" he asked, somehow sensing her mood. "What if I can't do this?" Question encompassed everything: the performance, the possibility of them, the person she was becoming. "Then you'll try again another time," he said simply. "But Octavia, I've watched you these past weeks. You're not just returning to who you were, you're becoming someone stronger." After they hung up, Octavia played the nocturne once more, allowing herself to feel every note. Something had shifted. The music no longer felt like a challenge to overcome, but a story she needed to tell. The night before the benefit, Dominic invited her to the Foundation's offices to see something special. He led her to a small gallery where photographs of young musicians lined the walls. Children from the Foundation's programs, their faces alight with discovery. "This is why we do this," he said. "Not for perfection, but for moments of joy." Among the photos was a new addition: Octavia at the piano during rehearsal, eyes closed, completely absorbed in the music. "How did you?" Teresa took it, he explained. She thought it captured something important. In the photograph, Octavia looked transported at peace in a way she hadn't been for years. The woman in that image was neither the heartbroken student who'd fled the stage, nor the meticulous planner who'd buried her. Passion she was someone new, someone whole. Dominic stood behind her, close enough that she could feel his warmth. "Whatever happens tomorrow, remember this moment. This is who you really are." She turned to face him, suddenly aware of how much had changed since that first day in the concert hall. His hand rose to touch her cheek, and when he leaned down to kiss her, it felt like the natural conclusion to a piece of music they'd been composing together all along that night. Octavia practiced the nocturne one final time, playing not for Julian's ghost or even for Dominic, but for herself, for the musician who had been silenced too long and was finally ready to be heard again. Dissonant chords. The morning of the benefit concert arrived with golden autumn sunlight streaming through Octavia's curtains. She allowed herself 5 minutes to lie still, mentally rehearsing her piece before the day's whirlwind began. Her phone already showed 3 texts from Penny about last-minute details. Dressed in a crisp blazer and practical flats, her evening gown and performance shoes. Safely packed in a garment bag, Octavia arrived at the concert hall as caterers unloaded there. Vans and technicians ran final sound checks. "There she is, our woman of the hour," called Teresa, violin case slung over her shoulder. The other musicians had taken to treating Octavia as one of their own, a subtle shift that still startled her each time. "Hardly," Octavia demurred. "Just playing a short piece at the end." "While also running the entire event," Teresa added. "Dominic says you're a miracle worker." The mention of his name brought a flush to Octavia's cheeks. After their kiss in the Foundation gallery, everything between them felt charged with new meaning. They had parted with unspoken promises hanging in the air, both aware that tonight after the benefit would be the beginning of something significant. "Speaking of Dominic," Teresa continued, "he asked me to tell you he's running late. Some emergency with a major donor." Octavia nodded, tamping down disappointment. There was too much to do anyway, no time for distraction. She immersed herself in final preparations, confirming details with the catering staff, adjusting lighting cues, ensuring the VIP seating was properly marked. By late afternoon, everything was ready. Octavia retreated to a small dressing room to transform from coordinator to performer. She unzipped the garment bag to reveal the dress she'd splurged on: a midnight blue, gowned with a subtle shimmer that caught the light as the fabric moved. Nothing like the second-hand dress from her last recital. As she pinned up her hair, a knock came at the door. "Delivery for Ms. Reynolds," called an unfamiliar voice. Octavia opened the door to find a florist with a stunning arrangement of blue hydrangeas. Dominic's thoughtful nod to their first real conversation. The card read simply, "Music finds its voice in you." Warmth bloomed in her chest. Whatever happened tonight, she was no longer alone on that stage. An hour before the event, Octavia made a final round of the venue. The concert hall looked magical. Soft lighting illuminated the floral arrangements. Programs were perfectly aligned on seats, and the stage waited. Centered by the gleaming grand piano, as she checked the backstage area, voices drifted from around. A corner one, immediately recognizable as Dominic's. Octavia moved toward the sound, eager to see him before guests arrived. "It's a respectable lineup," said another male voice, though hardly the cultural event of the season. Octavia froze. That cultured, slightly condescending tone belonged to Julian Blackwood. "We appreciate your family's donation," Dominic was saying, his voice cooler than Octavia had ever heard it. "The foundation's work with young musicians." Yes, very commendable," Julian interrupted. "My mother insisted we support it. Classical. Training for underprivileged youth and all that. Though I must say, I'm surprised you're including amateur performers. Standards should be maintained, even in charity events." Octavia's stomach dropped. He knew. Somehow Julian knew she was performing. She stepped into view, forcing composure into her features. "Julian, what a surprise." Both men turned. Julian looked. Much as she remembered, handsome in a polished way, his expression calculating as he took in her appearance. "Octavia," he said with practiced charm, "I heard you were working in events now. Rather a step down from performance, isn't it? Though perhaps more suitable to your ... abilities." Dominic moved to her side, his hand finding the small of her back. "Ms. Reynolds is both our event coordinator and our closing performer tonight. Her Chopin Nocturne is extraordinary." Julian's eyebrows rose. "Is it? How interesting." "Seemed to recall a rather different outcome the last time she attempted Chopin publicly." "People grow," Dominic said firmly. "Sometimes they just need the right environment to flourish." "Or the right patron," Julian replied with a thin smile. "I'll look forward to your performance, Octavia." For old time's sake, as he walked away, Octavia felt herself trembling. What is he doing here? How did he know I was playing? "His family made a substantial last-minute donation," Dominic explained, looking troubled. "I had no idea you knew each other until just now." He studied her face. Should I ask him to leave? The offer was tempting, but Octavia shook her head. "No, the foundation needs supporters." She took a deep breath. "But I can't perform, not with him watching." "Octavia, you don't understand. He'll be waiting for me to fail." Him sitting there, her voice caught. "I'll hear his laugh again." Dominic guided her to a quiet corner, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Listen to me. That man has already taken 3 years of music from you. Don't give him tonight as well." "I can't." "Yes, you can." His eyes held hers intently. "Play for the children in those photographs. Play for yourself. He only has power. If you give it to him." Guests began arriving, forcing Octavia back into her coordinator role. She moved through the pre-concert reception mechanically, checking details and solving minor crises while avoiding the corner where Julian held court with several trustees. The performance began, each musician showcasing pieces selected to highlight the foundation's mission. Backstage, Octavia paced, her mind replaying Julian's smirk, imagining his reaction when she took the stage. During intermission, she found Teresa tuning her violin. "I can't do this," Octavia confessed. "My ex is here, the one who ... double quotes." Understanding dawned on Teresa's face. "The one who made you stop playing." She set down her violin. "Let me tell you something about men like that. They win twice. When they break you, and again, when you stay broken." What if he's right? What if I embarrass myself? "Then you'll have tried," Teresa said firmly. "And tomorrow, you'll try again. But if you walk away now, you'll always wonder." When the second half began, Octavia stood in the wings, watching each performer with growing dread as her turn approached. She spotted Julian in the audience, whispering something to the woman beside him while looking bored. Then Dominic stepped onto the stage to introduce the final act. His eyes found hers in the darkness of the wings, and he smiled a private message, meant only for her. "Our final performer tonight is someone who reminds us why the foundation exists," he said to the audience. "Music is not just for those born to privilege or traditional training. It belongs to everyone with the courage to embrace it. It's a spotlight. shifted to the side of the stage. Octavia's cue. For one terrible moment, she couldn't move. Then she remembered the photograph in Dominic's gallery, her own face lost in music. Finding joy again after years of silence, taking a deep breath, Octavia stepped into the light. Perfect harmony, the spotlight felt warm on Octavia's skin as she crossed the stage to the waiting piano. Each step seemed to last an eternity. The rustle of her midnight blue gown against the polished floor, unnaturally loud in her ears. The audience was a blur of faces, though she was acutely aware of Julian, somewhere in that darkness. Waiting for her to falter, she took her seat at the bench, adjusting it slightly as she had done countless times in practice. The gleaming keys before her looked both inviting and terrifying. From the corner of her eye, she could see Dominic watching from the wings, his presence a silent reassurance. 3 deep breaths, just as Teresa had advised. Octavia placed her hands on the keys. For a breathless moment, nothing happened. Her fingers hovered, trembling slightly, as memories of her last performance threatened to overwhelm her. Julian's laughter echoed in her mind, along with his dismissive words. "Amateur hour is over." "Darling," then, almost unbidden, other voices rose to counter his. Dominic saying, "Music finds its voice in you." Teresa insisting, "If you walk away now, you'll always wonder." Finally, her own younger self, who had once played simply for the joy of creating something beautiful. Octavia began to play. The opening notes of the nocturne floated into the hall, gentle, questioning like the first raindrops before a cleansing storm. She kept her eyes on her hands, focusing on each phrase as she had practiced, letting muscle memory guide her through the familiar territory. When she reached the passage where she had stumbled 3 years ago, a flicker of panic rose in her chest. For a split second, her fingers hesitated, but then she pushed through, the notes flowing one into another with growing confidence. Gradually, the audience faded from her awareness. There was only the music now, its rises and falls, its whispers and declarations. Octavia leaned into the emotional heart of the piece, her body swaying slightly as the melody carried her forward. This was what she had forgotten, not just the technical skill, but this sense of communion with something larger than herself. Music wasn't about perfection. It was about connection to the composer's intention, to the listener's hearts, to her own deepest feelings. As the final notes approached, Octavia finally lifted her gaze from the keys. Her eyes found Dominic first, his face alight with pride. Then, almost involuntarily, she glanced toward where Julian sat. He was watching her, his expression unreadable. But it no longer mattered what he thought. The power he had held over her was gone, dissolved in the music she had reclaimed as her own. The nocturne ended with a gentle resolution, like a question finally answered. For a moment, silence filled the hall, and then came the applause. Washing over her in waves, Octavia rose, her legs surprisingly steady as she took her bow. The standing ovation continued as Dominic joined her on stage, presenting her with a bouquet of blue hydrangeas. His hand found hers, their fingers intertwining as they faced the audience together. Later, at the reception, Octavia moved through a sea of congratulations. Donors pressed business cards into her hand, asking if she was available for private events. Several parents of children in the Foundation's programs thanked her for showing their children what was possible. "You were magnificent," Teresa said, embracing her, "though I knew you would be." As the crowd thinned, Octavia found herself momentarily alone, watching Dominic across the room as he chatted with trustees. The evening felt dreamlike, a perfect resolution to the discord of the past. An impressive recovery. Julian's voice behind her was like a splash of cold water. Octavia turned slowly, steeling herself. He looked less imposing than she remembered. Just a man in an expensive suit, holding a glass of champagne with studied casualness. "Thank you," she said simply. Not quite conservatory level, of course. He continued, unable to resist the slight, but passionate, I suppose. "Dominic Valente seems quite taken with you." His gaze flicked to where Dominic stood. Quite the step up, socially speaking. 3 years ago, such comments would have devastated her. Now, Octavia merely smiled. You know, Julian, I've realized something. Music isn't about social climbing or impressing people like you. It's about finding your authentic voice, she said. Down her champagne glass. And I've found mine. She walked away before he could respond, feeling lighter with each step. When Dominic saw her approaching, his face brightened. There she is, he said, excusing himself from his conversation. The star of the evening. Hardly, she laughed, but it felt good. Better than good. It felt right. They stepped onto the terrace, the autumn night cool and clear around them. Austin's lights sparkled below like earthbound stars. I saw you. Talking to Julian, Dominic said carefully. Everything all right? Yes, Octavia replied, surprised to find it was true. He doesn't matter anymore. Dominic smiled, drawing her closer. I have a confession to make. I had ulterior motives asking you to play tonight. The Foundation is expanding its program to include adult education second chances for people who abandon music early. In life, his eyes held hers. We need a director who understands both the administrative side and the emotional journey, someone who's lived it. Octavia caught her breath. You want me to run the program, if you're interested? It would mean working closely together. His hand caressed her cheek. Very closely. I think I could manage that, she said, leaning into his touch. There's more, he continued. After watching you these past weeks, seeing you reclaim your music, your confidence have been inspired to do something I've been putting off. I'm going back to composing. You write music? Dominic nodded. Before the tech success, that was my dream. I have notebooks full of unfinished pieces. He looked almost shy. I'd like you to be the first to play them. I'd be honored, she whispered. From inside, the sound of a piano drifted through the open doors, one of the Foundation's young students playing for the remaining guests. The simple melody carried on the night air, a reminder of why they had all gathered. Listen to that, Dominic said softly. That's the sound of a beginning. Octavia rested her head against his shoulder, thinking of all the beginnings this night. Represented for the Foundation for them for her reconnection with music. 3 years ago, she had left a performance unfinished, but tonight had brought a different kind of completion. What happens now? She asked. Now, Dominic replied, his arms encircling her, we improvise. 6 months later, Octavia sat at the piano in their shared apartment, working through a difficult passage in Dominic's newest composition. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the music room they had created together, her upright piano beside his composer's desk. Walls lined with books and scores, the Valenti Foundation's adult program was flourishing under her direction. With a waiting list of students eager for their own second chances, twice a week, she taught piano to beginners whose faces lit up with the same joy she had rediscovered. She and Dominic had fallen into a rhythm as natural as music itself, her practical nature complementing his visionary thinking, his encouragement bolstering her when doubt crept in. They challenged each other, supported each other, and above all, believed in each other. Octavia's fingers found the troublesome measure again, this time flowing through it with newfound clarity. The piece was coming together, note by note, just as her life had reassembled itself into something more beautiful than she had imagined possible. From the doorway, Dominic watched her play, his expression one of quiet contentment. When she finished, he applauded softly. Perfect, he said. Octavia shook her head, smiling. Not perfect, but authentic. Oh, and that's better. As she rose from the bench to embrace him, Octavia thought of that final, unresolved note from her abandoned recital years ago. It had found its answer at last, not in a single triumphant performance, but in this ongoing symphony they were creating together, day by day, measure by measure, in perfect harmony.